Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Liverpool Connection Podcast. I'm Daz. This part of the episodes that I do, this is football and music one-on-one, where I bring somebody on to talk about football and also to talk about music. And who better than a radio presenter and DJ for BBC Radio 6 Music, Mr. Chris Hawkins. He's a lifelong Shrewsbury Town supporter. I know Liverpool have played them at least 4 times in the past. They've played 3 times in the past, 3 or 4 years in the FA Cup. I know that, and then played in 96 or something. But anyways, we've got Chris on to talk about his musical roots, about his football team, and about just what's going on in life. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Cheers for having me, Daz.
So I'm going to throw it out at you. Shrewsbury Town, League One. Are you, lifelong? You're a lifelong fan, obviously. Is that to do with your dad, your mum, your family-wise?
Good question. I'm from Shropshire, so that's kind of why. My uncle he's a lifelong fan, and he used to take me to my first games. When I was about 5 or 6, I used to go with him to the old Gay Meadow. And for many years as a kid, I barely missed a home game. I became obsessed very, very early on with football, and specifically with Shrewsbury Town. I did the thing that a lot of kids from my generation did. I kept a scrapbook. Every cutting went in the scrapbook. I'd wait at the players' entrance and get all of the players' autographs. And I don't mean just once. I'd get them every game. And I'd get the away team as well. And it was great when there was a cup run as well, because it meant really big clubs and famous players would be there, and I'd get their autographs.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, it's your bread and butter, really, like the FA Cup. I don't mean to disrespect, if you're not in the Premier League, or Championship, minnows. We saw it with Maidstone. Massive win for them against Ipswich. But FA Cup is your bread and butter. I remember capacity for your ground was about 9,000 to 10,000, I think. So it's especially when Liverpool come to town. I remember the 2-2 draw at your gaff. And it was just absolutely mayhem to see your supporters just going absolutely ape to drawing with a team like Liverpool. It holds a place in my heart, the FA Cup. I think it's lost its kind of shine in the last, I think, 5-10 years. Because I remember the 80s FA Cup, 70s, 80s was massive. And now it's kind of lost its shine, because it's usually all the Premier League teams that, get to the semi-final, the final. So, but for you, football's a part of your life, and obviously music's a part of your life. And the same goes with, what were your parents listening to when you were a young kid?
Nothing very credible. But I'm quite respectful, I think, of whatever people's music tastes are. I don't really judge. I think it's each to their own. So I didn't really grow up in a musical household, but I grew up listening to a lot of radio, getting into pop music, like most kids, listening to pop music, going to football. That was what I did. And the two somehow, they kind of felt like they went hand in hand to a point. I suppose in part because I was so into both. And I don't think my music taste when I was a kid would be considered very credible. But as I got older, I remember at school starting to, in art classes, the cool kids in art, we'd be allowed to listen to music in those lessons. And I remember starting to hear more more credible stuff, and the Stone Roses in particular, that was a big moment, because that was when I think I made a shift in my mind from being a fan of popular chart music to something very different, something bigger, something much more real. So the Stone Roses was I would say, a big turning point for me.
So do you think the Manchester scene was a turning point as well? Not just Stone Roses, but, you know, Happy Mondays. I mean, New Order as well, and Spiral Carpets. Because for me, you know, I was born just outside of Liverpool. I come from a town called Thornby. It's the like posh Scousers. But, you know, I grew up like with the Lars, but then, you know, Stone Roses, there was something about the Stone Roses for me, the psychedelic, you know, the little guitar licks by John Squire, but also they just looked cool, didn't they? I mean, they wore flares. Flares weren't cool, but they made them cool.
Yeah, for sure. And the same for a lot of those bands. You know, New Order remain one of my favourite bands. I adore them and have seen them live many, many times. So I guess, the Manchester scene was a big part of my musical education. I'm from Shropshire, as we've talked about, and it was a county pretty much devoid of live music. There was a nightclub called Park Lane that I used to go to when I was nearly old enough to be allowed into nightclubs. Park Lane was, if I say no jeans or trainers, you can probably imagine the kind of place that it was. And it was only in retrospect that I thought about the fact that I love going there on a Friday night. You'd go to Park Lane at the end of the week. You'd go to Park Lane, and it would be surprising if you didn't see half the Shrewsbury Town football team there. And it was only as I got older that I realised, what the hell were they doing on a Friday night before a game in a nightclub till 1 or 2 in the morning?
It's crazy. Well, I mean, you know, back in the day, you'd have football players smoking, drinking, and doing whatever, you know.
You know what? I think someone asked me recently, what's the best rock and roll book? And I would say it's Paul McGrath's autobiography.
Oh.
You know?
Yeah. Well, there's some Liverpool players that, like, you know, their autobiography is like, wow. You got away with some stuff back then, you know. Times have changed, obviously, with footballers. I mean, they're very, well, I mean, unless you're a naughty Marcus Rashford who's, you know, in the headlines for, you know, going out in Dublin to a club. But, you know, most of the time, it's, you know, footballers are put your head down, stay out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Rashford, as a young 20-something going to a club, is a bit different to having 3 pints at half time.
yeah, definitely in a ciggy. while you're on the bench.
Well, yeah. I remember going to Gay Meadow as a kid. Do you remember Jerry Daly? He played for United, and then he was he had a lot of caps for the Republic of Ireland. And he came to Shrewsbury. A lot of players on their way down, if you like, came to Shrewsbury. Certainly at the back end of the 80s and in the early 90s. And I remember Jerry Daly. He wasn't on the bench. He was injured, and he was sat in front of me and smoked his way through the whole of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it would never happen. Never happen these days. Yeah, because I remember actually Istanbul when Liverpool played AC Milan, and there was a player on their bench smoking. But you know, back then you still didn't really bat an eyelid. But now you're just like, you know, that's the thing with footballers too, Chris, is like they're still human beings and they still need a release. But you still think to yourself, like, you're getting paid so much money. Just do your football, stay clean. And then, you know, at 33, 34, you retire and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but that is obviously a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, it is. I want to know also, like, when you got into DJing, because I love your podcast, how to DJ podcast. Please, everyone, go check that out. But I mean, you've had some of my heroes on: Orbital, Norman Jade, Lauren Garnier, Carl Cox, the great David Holmes, and one of my favourites. He got lost for a while, I think, John Carter. He's one of those other ones that went to Ibiza and like didn't come back for a while. I'm still trying to look for Derek DeLarge. Like, he went and then nobody's ever heard of what happened to him. But yeah, I mean, when did you start, really getting into DJing? Was it, because for me, it was probably around the Stone Roses time as well.
In my mum and dad's garage at home. So I grew up in this tiny little village, right, in North Shropshire. And we had a five-a-side team, but we only had 4 players. 3 of them were my cousins. So my sister always had to go in goal. That was the village five-a-side team. And I built a kind of disco booth in my mum and dad's garage out of chipboard with a ghetto blaster double cassette deck on the front, with the speakers turned round. You could unclip the speakers, turn them round. And it gets more tragic. I got a torch on either side, and I put coloured crepe paper over the end of the torches. My sisters would be the only people to ever come, and they were forced to come and dance in the garage as I played music off cassette and flashed the torches on and off by hand. It's not a look that I'm particularly proud of, but it's the answer to your question. I then DJ'd. I wasn't old enough to drive, but my mum used to take me to the nightclub that I mentioned, Park Lane in Shrewsbury, and I would occasionally DJ the under 16s night that they had there. And then got into radio. My local station was BBC Radio Shropshire, and I will be forever grateful to them for giving me 2 weeks work experience, which turned into pretty much a part-time and then near full-time job before I did my A-levels. I carried on doing voluntary work and occasional paid shifts at Radio Shropshire. Went to university and went to Nottingham and worked at BBC Radio Nottingham. And by the 3rd year, I was presenting Drive Time on Radio Nottingham. So during my finals, I had to leave 2 exams early to get to do my Drive Time show on Radio Nottingham. So I'd fly through the exam and then get to the studios to do the show. And stayed in Nottingham for another year after finishing university, and then moved to London and got a gig on BBC Radio London. It was called GLR at the time. It was a station that I always wanted to be at. The most incredible lineup: Chris Evans, Danny Baker, Chris Morris. The lineup was unbelievable. And I got to do a show there before Six Music started, and I've been at Six Music since it started back in 2002.
Yeah, it's crazy, your little musical journey. I mean, how is it being on the radio? Because obviously we have so many social media aspects of it, YouTube and everything. And you do the morning show. So my first question is, are you a morning person?
You know what? You can imagine it's a question I get asked quite a lot. And no, I'm not. No, I mean, how do you do it? I'll tell you how, because I believe that Six Music is the greatest radio station on the planet. And I get to do a show a day on that radio station. So how do you get out of bed at 4 a.m. every single day? Well, the motivation is that you're doing a show on this station that I absolutely love, probably more now than I did even when I got the job in the first place. I absolutely live for that show every day.
One of my favourite things that you do is the name and the music. That is absolutely brilliant. Just because, I listen to you and you sound like you're having a ball, because it really is funny, some of these names, because it's out of nowhere, and it's all the viewers, right? Just sending it in, just going, I've heard my mate's name in the song, and then you literally, you wouldn't have thought it, but then you actually like listen to it and you're just like, I think that's what he just said.
Yeah.
And it's mental. It's a fun, like, segment that you do.
It's you know what, it's just silly. It's a ridiculous way to make a living. But yeah, once a week it's names in songs, and you're right. Listeners send in the songs where they think they hear their name, a family member's name, or a mate's name. And you know what? You've heard those songs thousands of times, but somehow they've heard a name in it, and from that point on, you can never unhear it. You just it's got so out of hand that we're actually going to do it at a festival this summer, a live stage version of names in songs, and a promoter has asked me about doing merch with the best names on t-shirts.
It's not going to be one of those where the crowd shout out, is it?
It's kind of in that world. We had a brilliant one not so long back where it was like next level, rather than just a first and a surname. So Dennis Bradley is one of the best, Whitney Houston, and I love you, Dennis Bradley. But there's a recent one that's Keith, the graphic designer, and that is art. It's mind-blowing. It's unreal. Keith, the graphic designer, and it's clear as hell, and you can't unhear it.
No, it's stuff like that. Like, if you're an early morning person like myself, I like to listen to, this world is obviously you turn on the telly and it's just bad news after bad news. So having a radio show that you can rely on every morning to just make you laugh. And that's what you do, you play good music and you make people laugh. And I think it's got to make you feel good.
Mate, that is such a kind thing to say. It means loads to me. It means the world to me. The idea is that I've barely slept. The alarm goes off at 4 and, I'm waking up with you, with everyone listening, and we're all in it together. Who knows what the day's going to hold? I've got a friend who said to me the other day that he loves to listen, and listens for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and then he puts the Today program on. He does the nonsense and then listens to something grown up.
Well, that's what you do. I mean, for me, I get to listen to you, and then I get to, get the 4 kids up ready for school. So I appreciate you giving me laughs and good music.
It's funny that you should mention the kids with the names in songs. That seems to have become a kind of family moment, like an old-fashioned family moment gathered round the radio, where mums and dads tell me that they get the kids round. They get them ready for school early on a Wednesday, which is when we do names in songs, and they all have a bit of a laugh, a bit of a giggle before the kids go to school.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, for me, I'm up very early. I'm 6 hours behind UK time. So, yeah, my kids won't be around any radio that early. Yeah, I'm just a morning person. But I do want to talk about how to do DJ podcast again, though. But as I've said, you've had so many amazing guests. Who would you like to be on there that you haven't had already?
That's a big question. So I've been really lucky. You've listed some of the lovely guests that have been on. And their stories are all inspiring, fascinating, hair-raising. Pete Tong hasn't done it yet, so I'd love to get Pete Tong on. I'd like to get the Chemical Brothers on.
Oh, yeah.
That's been in the offing for a while, so hopefully that's going to happen soon. Who would you like me to get on?
Sasha.
Yeah, Sasha's lined up, actually. Yeah.
He's just, Sasha and John Digweed for me are just the pinnacle of DJing. I've been a massive fan of both of them since day one. Actually, one of his mixes he did on BBC Six Music, it was probably about 4 years ago, and it wasn't like a club set. It was in Ibiza, but it was more like down tempo and breaks, and it was just amazing. I think that's where his, with Sasha, his ear for music is just absolutely unbelievable. And Chemical Brothers. I actually saw the Chemical Brothers when they were the Dust Brothers, actually in Orlando, because I moved over here a long time ago, and they were at a club called The Edge, and they played outside, and that's when they were Dust Brothers, and it was their first appearance in America, and I was just blown away by them. And then obviously they had to do the name change because Dust Brothers over here as well. But yeah, they've just gone strength to strength. They're one of the best like electronic live acts. Them and Underworld would be another one, which I would love for you to get on.
Well, stay tuned because Underworld coming soon. It's been a real journey. I love getting to talk to each of these DJs, all with all amazing different stories. Like I said, all of them inspiring. In some cases, hair raising. But that they all, I think, pretty much have one thing in common, and that is, and it's the same as the radio DJs that I speak to who are also on. So it's club DJs and radio DJs, and it's all about the 10,000 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like for me, I'm obviously like a Liverpool Football Club podcast, but lately in the last 6 months, I've been doing this football and music episodes, and I've been bringing in, DJs and musicians that support other teams, just like yourself. And it's just great to hear these stories because like you said, in the beginning, football and music go hand in hand. Same with Clobber as well. Like I had Brandon Block on, and boy, we didn't even talk about his crazy times, because he had some crazy times, but it was just about him being a football supporter and how he started DJing, and everyone's kind of unique. They have different stories, to tell, and I love that. And same with the bands as well. Like, there's some bands that one's a Liverpool supporter, one's an Evertonian, one's a Spurs supporter. I'm like, how do you manage that in a band? And they're all like, when they tour, one of them will run off. They've got a little telly by the side or a radio so they can hear like the scores and stuff. And I'm like, that's what it's about, I love stories like that. And, and same with yourself. I love to hear that they're not just musicians, they're human beings. They have, mental health issues. I think we put DJs on pedestals these days, the EDM thing, especially over here, the superstar DJ, like gets to travel the world and, gets to stay in these hotels, but the traveling gets to them. Being on an aeroplane gets to them. But people, just like footballers, we put them on pedestals and just go, they make so many millions a year. These top DJs make so many millions, but they're still human beings, and they still have day to day, the family. They've got to still do that, And what's your thoughts on all of that? Because I think in today's society, everyone looks up to footballers and musicians, and they're just like us, but they just make a bit more money.
Yeah. Well, I think you've pretty much said it all. I remember once when I was, I guess, about 10 years old, I'd just been mascot for Shrewsbury, and ran out onto the pitch with a player that you'll definitely know. Nigel Pearson was our captain.
Yeah.
And I ran out with him, and it remains one of the best moments of my life. And then soon after that, a friend of my dad's had something to do with Liverpool Football Club, and he took us to Anfield. We went on a battered old coach, and we went to do a tour of the stadium before a game. And we did the kind of official tour, but I wandered off from everybody else, and they left without me. And I was left at Anfield, and my dad stayed because obviously he needed to find me. And a really lovely security guy said, "Do you want me to take you onto the pitch?" So I got a picture of me touching the "This is Anfield" sign. So I've got that picture still, and went out onto the pitch, and then held the trophies, of which there were plenty. A very different trophy cabinet to the Shrewsbury one, which only ever had the Welsh Cup in it. And yeah, I know, not even Welsh team. And I think back to, and I met Alan Hansen. He was arriving, so he was still playing at the time, and I met him. So in terms of what you just said about footballers and DJs, musicians, you know, the ones that are making the millions, they're the ones that that kind of come through. I'm so respectful of, because it's so much pressure in the spotlight to deliver. In footballers' cases, in a pretty short period of time. I live near a footballer now who plays in the Premier League, and you know what? He is 110% dedicated to his life as a footballer. He totally gets that he's incredibly well paid and will be for a short time, and he gets it. But he's been able to handle it. But that's not all footballers at 20-something. You know, why would they know what to do with £100,000 a week paychecks? How would anyone know what to do? And the same goes for bands that have sort of overnight success, and the same goes for the big DJs. And I suppose, coming back to what you talked about in your question, you know, look at Avicii. Maybe, you know, certainly at the time, the best DJ, most sought after on the planet. And it was just all too much in the end.
Yeah, that was, you know, a sad case, and obviously, you know, and same with footballers. Some of these really good, you know, 16-year-old, 17-year-old kids then don't get picked. You know, we heard about the Man City kid, you know, that took his own life because he didn't, you know, continue with it. So, you know, they are human beings, and we've got to look at it like that. But I want to end on a good note. I always ask my football and music guests, who would your ultimate festival lineup be for a Friday headliner, Saturday headliner, and Sunday?
Wow. Okay, so I've got a piece of paper and a pen here. I'm going to write.
That's alive or dead.
Okay, so headliners for each night, yeah?
Yeah.
For the Friday, I'm going to say Talking Heads. I love Talking Heads, and Once in a Lifetime is one of my favourite songs ever. And there's kind of talk about them getting back together. Whether it would be the same, I guess not, but still one of, to my mind, the greatest bands of all time. So they would headline on the Friday. I'm going to say for the Saturday night, it's going to be the Chemical Brothers.
Yeah, nice one.
And then Sunday night, you know who? The greatest songwriter of all time, John Lennon.
Brilliant. I love it. I love all three of those. Yeah. Well, what more can I say? Yeah, I'd go to that.
Mate, we've kind of come full circle in the conversation, and you talked about the last time that you played us, and we drew 2-2, and it was an FA Cup fourth round replay.
Yeah.
And you beat us in the replay, and I was there for that game, and man, it was an own goal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I forgot what I think his first name is David. Maybe I don't remember his last name. I just know it was an own goal, and like we were quite lucky. So yeah. But Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. Good luck with both the radio show. Keep making people happy. Keep making people smile. And then the How to DJ. I cannot wait for the upcoming guests, because again, you're on what, the 74th episode, 75th.
Getting there. By the way, Roshan Williams was the own goal. Yeah, mate. So I can't thank you enough for having me on the podcast. I love listening. It's you do what I love about podcasts, and just make it a conversation. Mm-hmm. I kind of like that there's a structure with no structure.
Yeah,
it flows, and it's just like, it feels like being down the pub, which is what I think any great broadcast should feel like, and that's what I think when I listen to you. So you've been really kind about the show. Thank you very much. For those that don't know, it's every weekday morning on BBC Radio 6 Music. And the podcast, I think it's obvious. I'm really proud of the way it's kind of turned out. We've only been doing it a couple of years. And actually, maybe you're the first person I'm telling now, is that it's about to go, instead of being in series, it's going to be once every 2 weeks. So some great names lined up, including Brandon Block.
Yeah, you'll have a laugh with him. I mean, you'll have a laugh. You'll have probably a little cry, because he's been there, he's done that. And it's just, again, we both, like I said, we both love football. We both love music. And obviously I have a problem with trainers. But that's my problem. But I appreciate your kind words, because, that's all I ever want to do with this podcast, is make it just like a chat. I mean, I have a few notes down, but it's basically, off the cuff, whatever way it's going. But I appreciate your kind words, because I think sometimes hosts get lost in their own, bubble. And, I started this podcast because of my granddad. He used to try and tell me stories back in the day, the Shankly stories, and I wouldn't listen. So this is my ode to him. I'm listening to everybody else's story. So that's, God bless him. He finally got through to me. But again, Chris, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers, Daz. Thank you.